Hey everyone, it's Rich. Wanted to give you the devotion for this week. So on Sunday, we get to sing Come Thou Font of Every Blessing, one of our, of course, most beloved hymns, and has been for really many, many years. It was written in 1758, or at least the lyrics that are the basis of that hymn were written all the way back then. It's a fellow named Robert Robinson. You may remember we've talked about Come Thou Font of Every Blessing in previous devotions. So I'm going to focus on some different stanzas this time than we've talked about before, and just a couple details about Robinson. He grew up in England in poverty. His father died when he was 10, and left his father when he died left he and his mother with very difficult financial circumstances. He was put into indentured servitude at age 15 with a barber and hairdresser in London. Didn't take too well to that. He was apparently spending too much time reading his Bible and studying to become a good barber. But so he eventually left that and did eventually become a minister. But the story of how he became a Christian is kind of interesting. In 1752, I think he was 17 years old, he went to hear George Whitefield speak, with the stated goal of going to an evangelical meeting to heckle the believers, make fun of the proceedings, and to scoff at those poor deluded Methodists. Anyway, nevertheless, while he was there, Whitefield, of course, being the powerful evangelist that he was, God used the message, and Robinson became a Christian. Not too many years later, just 3 years later, he wrote "Come Thou Font of Every Blessing" when he was still in his 20s. So I want to focus on the two last stanzas this time. Let me read you the first one. "Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above." So I want to go all the way back to when Ronald Reagan was president to tell a story. My first job out of undergraduate school was teaching at a private school. I taught carpentry, masonry, and horsemanship. Maybe some of you have heard me talk about those days before. We had a program with a local farm and stables called Timber Ridge Stables, and we would take the kids over there, the students, after school. They would work on really hard jobs, things like cleaning out stables and hauling bales of hay and doing all kind of farm labor, which was really good for them. When they finished their chores, though, we would teach them how to ride, and we could, go on some trail rides and go on some dirt roads in the area and so forth. And eventually, that program was so successful, we started our own stables at the school where I worked, and I taught horsemanship then as well. Well, this stanza always reminds me of a horse named Mama, a horse that I kind of took care of and rode daily at times. Some of you may know what a fetter is, but some of you may not. The word fetter is used in this. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. At one time, I actually knew how to fetter a horse and how to tie a fetter. So let me tell you the story of Mama and why this stanza always makes me think of her. Well, she was an American saddlebred. American saddlebreds are known to be very intelligent, very athletic, and often full of personality, and they're used as show horses quite often. And Mama fit all of those characteristics. She was a very affectionate horse. She loved for me to go bareback riding with her. And sometimes when the kids were done with their trail rides and all their chores, and they were off on their way, I would just kind of jump right up on her, sometimes without even a blanket, just with a halter and just go. And we used to have great times in the late afternoons or early evenings doing that. And she loved it. And we would go on some dirt roads in the area, and sometimes I would even let her go to full gallop, and it was just a great time between man and his pet, so to speak. She was also very affectionate. When we would come back from those rides, I would usually wash and groom her, and she would always stand perfectly still and really close to me. And she would often reach down with her neck and head and rub against me and so forth. I mean, real bond and real affection. But she did not like to put all the tack on. And sometimes when we would take the kids on trail rides, I had to completely suit her up, because part of what the kids were learning was, how to put a saddle on and how to do all the stuff. Well, she didn't like that very much, and she would even start to wander away from me, not aggressively, but she would start to move away or wander or move around or get skittish when she knew I was trying to put all the gear on her. So I used to have to use a fetter. And what a fetter is you can, there's even really terrible looking ones like they use with a tiger in a circus, where it's like an actual chain. But we had these like straps that we would just kind of tie around their legs for different purposes. And she would let me do it. I would just gently stroke her legs and then kind of work down and pet her, and she knew what I was doing. And then I would go all the way down to her ankles and tie her ankles together. And she would let me do it, and she trusted me, but she knew what was coming and she didn't like it. And when I first learned to do that, it was a little intimidating, right? You're putting your face right down at the ankles of a horse that could kick your head off if it wanted to. So what a fetter means, or in this context, was you tie the legs together so the horse can't wander away. How wonderful would it be if we could learn to see God's kindness as a gentle, constraining hand on our lives, keeping us from wandering, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could recognize when he's holding us back, or when he needs to bind us a little bit or bind our legs together, because he's preparing us for the next journey that he's taking us on. Just like I was binding Mama's ankles because I was putting a saddle and some other stuff on her, because we were getting ready to go on a really interesting journey together. And sometimes God has to do that to reel us back in or to prepare us for what's next. And, I think one of the great object lessons in this is to think of the fetters that God's trying to put around us sometimes as a real positive thing, that it's a measure of his affection and care for us. It's something that he's using intentionally and purposefully to prepare us for what's next. And then just quickly, the last verse. On that day when freed from sinning, I shall see thy lovely face. Clothed then in blood-washed linen, how I'll sing thy sovereign grace. Come, my Lord, no longer tarry, take my ransomed soul away. Send thine angels now to carry me to realms of endless day. I hope you got to see Chris Florence's devotion this week, because he was talking about our ultimate graduation is when we graduate to the next life, right, to heaven. And that's kind of what this stanza is talking about. It reminds me of how we have this very big picture hope in heaven. And yet, and on one hand, visions of heaven, however, can seem very remote and removed and distant and vague and abstract, right? And sometimes so foreign that maybe they hardly feel like they give us a very practical or immediate sense of hope. But on the other hand, makes me think, if we really allowed ourselves to fully grasp this concept of heaven and all that it's going to mean, even just from the small picture of it that we have now from the scriptures, how that really has a great power to transform us and to give us a sense of hope that we can find in almost no other way outside of God. So let's look at some of the scriptures behind this stanza real quickly. It begins, on that day when freed from sinning, I shall see thy lovely face. Well, if you're like me, it made you think of several things in the Bible, right? 1 Corinthians 13:12, I'll read from the King James. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I also am known. So this is reminding us that heaven is a place where we'll be freed from all the types of darkness that are in this world, and freed from the cloudiness and darkness that we cause and bring upon ourselves because of our sins. In fact, we will no longer sin, we will no longer be able to sin, and we will no longer face sickness or pain or death. We will no longer experience loneliness or frustration or any of the other sort of difficult and challenging emotions that come with life in this fallen world. Next it says, clothed then in blood-washed linen, how I'll sing thy sovereign grace. Well, that of course makes us think of Revelation, right? Revelation 7:13 through 17 goes like this. Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, these who are clothed in the white robes, who are they? And where have they come from? I said to him, My Lord, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones who came out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tabernacle over them. They will hunger no longer, nor thirst any more, nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat, for the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd. And he will guide them to springs of water of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Further, we see Revelation 21. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them. They shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain, for the first things have passed away. And there's actually a number of other scriptures we could cite from this last stanza alone. But maybe we'll just finish with this. It also made me think of how the glory of heaven will be so overwhelming that it can give us such a tangible hope, because nothing in this life can compare to it, right? Paul says in Romans 8, For I consider the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For this anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected, in hope that the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So I hope that you think more deeply about Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing when we sing it this weekend. Of course, the first couple of verses we all know very well. You may want to look up these last two. We don't always sing those, but they're rich in scriptural references, and I hope they'll be a blessing to you like they have been to me. I hope we can all get together soon. Talk to you soon.